And now what I'm going to show you is the difference between induction and conduction using an electroscope. So we've still got our glass rod. So we're still going to be, this is still going to have a positive charge once we've charged it. Okay? And we're going to look at what happens to the electroscope depending on what we do, right? So here's our electroscope and our charged rod. And it's quite dry today and cold, so we get a really good charge buildup. And we can see that we are inducing the movement of charge in the electroscope. But the overall charge of the electroscope is still neutral. So when I take it away, the charge moves back and distributes evenly throughout the electroscope. When I bring the glass rod back again so that the field interacts, it induces the movement of charge. Pull it away, the charge redistributes and everything is neutral, and gravity can pull the leaves down again. Induce the movement of charge, pull it away, and the charge spreads evenly throughout the electroscope. Now what I'm going to show you with the help of my son is we are going to show you conduction. So I've got the glass rod, okay? Now what will happen, I'm going to touch the electroscope. What is going to happen? That is actually going to result in the movement of electrons. Just like a little static shock, when you get a static shock. We are going to actually cause the movement of charge. Right, you can see, so the electroscope, we're causing a force of repulsion at the bottom of the electroscope. Now when I pull the rod away, you'll see it will drop down slightly, but there will still be a force of repulsion, and they will partially hold themselves away. Now my son, who's going to help me here, you can see he is, let's just move a little bit further away, he's barefoot, one foot bare, and you can see the leaves of the electroscope are still repelling each other. Now touch it with your hand, my boy. And he earths it. And what happens is the charge is able to move through his body, all the way through his body to the ground, through that bare foot. And that causes neutralization of the charge in the electroscope, and we lose the force of repulsion, and the leaves of the electroscope drop down because of the force of gravity. Now that is conduction. Let's see whether we can just quickly do it again. There we go. So we're causing a force of repulsion. Electrons move from the electroscope onto the glass rod, because remember the glass rod is positively charged. So the negative electrons in the electroscope are attracted towards the glass rod. So we've caused the movement of electrons from the glass rod, from the electroscope, to the glass rod. Now we take it away. Oh, no, we don't have enough charge to cause. There we go. But you can see repulsion is happening. We just can't. And when you touch it, then earthing it causes the charge to drain away, resulting in a neutral net charge. And the leaves then drop. So when you touch the electroscope with the rod, you allow conduction to occur. And that is the difference between conduction and induction. Okay, so we've had a look at the actual electroscope, and we showed induction and conduction using the electroscope. But now let's explain what happens. First of all, we need to understand that when we start with the electroscope is neutral. So it has a neutral charge, right? And these leaves, the metal leaves at the bottom of the electroscope, are flexible, and they are what is very sensitive to the presence of electrostatic charge. So when you start with a neutral electroscope, because of gravity, which is another field force, we are expecting the flexible metal leaves of the electroscope to hang downwards under the influence of gravity. That, when that is the case, that indicates that there is no electrostatic charge present. Okay, so there is no field evident between the two leaves of the electroscope, and therefore they don't exert a field force on each other, and they will hang downwards only under the influence of gravity. However, when we then charge our glass rod, which had a positive charge because it's a glass rod, okay, what happens is we bring positive charge close to the electroscope, and the field force starts to influence the electrons inside the electroscope. Now remember, the electroscope is metallic, so it conducts electricity. What that means is that the electrons are free to move around this electroscope. And what happens is when you bring the electrostatic field within a close enough distance that it starts to influence the electrons on the electroscope, what happens is those electrons start to move in response to the charge on the glass rod. Now remember that the glass rod is positively charged and that opposite charges attract. So what will happen is that, remember that this thing is neutral. We start with it in neutral, right? So there's positive and negative charge distributed evenly throughout the electroscope. But as we bring the positive charge close to the electroscope, then the electrons are free to move. And they will start to move upwards, and they will accumulate around the top of the electroscope. Remember, the electrons are what are mobile, they are what moves. The positive charge, remember, positive charge can't move. The protons and the nucleus of the atoms cannot move, but because then the electrons move up towards the top of the electroscope, what it does is it leaves a relative positive charge at the bottom. And what we then have at the bottom of the electroscope is that we have like charges in these metal leaves, and the field force around the positive charges therefore cause a force of repulsion in the metal leaves, and the metal leaves therefore split apart, and they counteract some of that force of gravity. So they're only under the influence of gravity here, and here we introduce an electrostatic field force as a result of the movement of charge, and the metal leaves will then repel each other. Okay? When you, however, the overall charge here of the electroscope it still is neutral. It's just that some of the negative charge has moved to the top of the electroscope. When we withdraw the rod, we then move back to this scenario where the electroscope is neutral and the charge is evenly distributed throughout the electroscope, and the leaves will then drop back down. And as you put the charge rod close, it'll push apart, drop down, push apart, drop down, push apart, drop down. Okay? So it's important to understand that with induction, when you withdraw the rod, that the metal leaves will again drop down, because there is in both of these pictures, in picture A and in picture B, the net charge of the electroscope is neutral. It's just that here, the negative charge tends to accumulate at the top, leaving positive charge at the bottom, whereas in this picture, the charge is evenly distributed through the entire metallic part of the electroscope. Okay? So that is what induction is. We are inducing the movement of charge by introducing a charged object into close enough proximity that the field force has an influence on the movement of static charge. Okay? Then to look at conduction, what happens then with conduction? Again, we start with this scenario, and we introduce the rod, the leaves start to move apart, exactly the same thing happens, but we touch the top of the electroscope now with the charged object. Okay? And what happens when you touch it, it's just like when you get a little static shock, right? Now the charge can actually change locations. It can move from one object to another. We're providing a path for the electrons to move, and what happens is all the negative electrons that have been attracted by the positive rod to the top of the electroscope actually will try and jump across onto the positively charged rod in order to try and neutralize this rod, right? So you will get the movement of electrons onto that glass rod, and that will leave, obviously we've got positive charge already here at the bottom, even when we were coming close, but what that will do is it will leave positive charge behind on the electroscope, and the rod will become more neutral. Then when we withdraw the rod, okay, so when we take the rod away, that will leave behind a net positive charge throughout the electroscope. Okay? So the electroscope will now have a net positive charge. Because we've taken electrons away, they have been taken away. So we're leaving an excess of, or we now have a shortage of electrons on the electroscope. So when we take the rod away, that shortage of electrons will be evident, and you will maintain this, the split. The electrostatic charge will maintain itself at the bottom of the electroscope, and that repulsive force will maintain itself, and it will stay split apart like that. So with conduction, when you withdraw the rod, this remains and you still get the split apart. With induction, when you withdraw the rod, the leaves drop back down again because the net charge is neutral the whole time. We've just moved the charge around. Here, when you allow conduction to occur and the electrons actually jump across onto the rod, just like in a static shock, we change the net charge and we have a resultant net positive charge and a resultant repulsion that remains once the rod has been removed. So that is the difference between induction and conduction, and that is what the electroscope will look like once you have withdrawn the rod with conduction. Again, if you live in a place that is humid, like I'm doing this demonstration in Durban, where we tend to have a lot of heat and humidity, it's actually quite difficult to demonstrate the conduction side of things unless it's a very cold day in the middle of winter with very low humidity, like today. And then we can demonstrate this. The reason why it's so difficult to demonstrate the effects of static charge when there is humidity around is because the humidity actually drains the charge away, and the charge doesn't hang around for long enough often to see this. So if we did this in the middle of summer, like in February, it's very difficult to see this. So today is June, the middle of winter for us, and we were able to see it quite clearly. So that is what conduction is. And the flexible leaves on the bottom of the electroscope will maintain their position because of that net charge. Okay, today we are going to show the difference between attraction and repulsion with electrostatic charge. So we've got the glass rod, which, remember, when you rub it and cause triboelectric charging to happen, tends to have a positive charge. I've put it on a wooden table because the wood insulates it really well. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to charge. Remember that the glass rod is an insulator, so the charge will not move. So we can actually just charge one side of the rod as it's sitting on the pivot. Obviously I want to do it on the pivot because I don't want to move it around and cause any grounding unnecessarily. Now I'll take the other glass rod and we'll triboelectric charge this rod. And what will happen now is that we have two rods that have the same charge. So they will both be positively charged. Okay? And now, what should happen is we should get a force of repulsion. There we go. So I'm pushing now. Can you see I'm causing a push force? That is a force of repulsion. Let's just wait for it to slow down. Now we'll try and make it slow down. It's not difficult. Okay, there we go. You can see it's a force of repulsion. So I'm causing a push force. If I could slow it down and push it back again. Right, so that is a force of repulsion with the charged rod. So we have two positively charged rods. Now, if I change rods, this rod is neutrally charged. Okay, so this glass rod I have not rubbed. So this glass rod is neutral. And now, we have a force of attraction. So you can see now I'm causing a pull to happen. Okay, you can see there now it's pulling. There's much less of a difference in charge, but you can see that I'm pulling now. So we have created a force of attraction between the neutral rod, which is in my hand, and the glass rod, which is running out of charge as we speak. But you can see there we had a difference. So the uncharged rod, we had a force of attraction, and the charged rod, which now will be earthed, we caused a force of repulsion. Because there was, here we had, when I charged this rod, we had like charges, and therefore we had repulsion. It's still actually repelling it. And when we have neutral versus positive, we actually have a relative opposite charge and therefore a force of attraction between the two rods. Okay, so just demonstrating both attraction and repulsion.